It's time to talk baseball free agency. Yes, Major League Baseball, that time of the year. We're talking about all those guys on the market and where are they going to go. And to do that, we're joined by Sportsnaut's MLB insider, Dan Connolly. And Dan, I love this time of the year. We're getting close to the winter meetings. Obviously, a lot of moving and shaking going on in the league. And this year's free agent crop, maybe not as electric as it was last year, but the big fish, Shohei Ohtani, is out there. When you look at this free agent crop going into this offseason, where does it rank versus like the past few years?
I think it's top heavy. I think there are some guys that are incredibly intriguing, whether it's Bellinger, whether it's Yamamoto, or specifically Ohtani. And Ohtani is going to be the one. We're going to talk records here. 400 million, maybe more, I don't know, probably in that range, but he should break the specific free agent record that was set by Judge, not including extensions, but guys who are actually in free agency. And I think it's going to be top heavy. I think there are some pretty good, solid starting pitchers out there, which obviously everybody needs and wants, but I do think it drops off pretty quickly. And I think when that happens, you might look at some trades this year. I mean, there's already been some trade talk. There are some big names, and we can get to that later, on the potential trade market, including Juan Soto, perhaps. So there are, I think there's a lot of names that could be moved this offseason, whether it's free agency or it's potential trades.
Yeah, and I'm wearing my Padres hat because I know the hard day is coming for them. You talked about Juan Soto. But let's start with the free agents, starting with Ohtani. Clearly, the guy out there, and you said it, he's going to set records. He is an amazing player in so many ways, and so he's going to get what he deserves. But also, we heard in the past few days that he's even open to a shorter-term contract. When you look at where you think he's going to end up, is there going to be a surprise entrant into the race for Ohtani, or do you think it's down really to a handful of teams?
For me, the surprise entry is the Seattle Mariners, because I think that they obviously need a guy who can really hit. Whether it's a first baseman, an outfielder, a DH, they obviously have a history with Japanese stars, and I think that would be a great fit. I mean, everyone's saying LA, maybe the New York teams, could the Mets make a splash again? But I think that Seattle's a team that's out there and is just kind of waiting, and they obviously have great pitching. To get an offensive player of some import, they're probably going to have to trade one of those young pitchers. They would prefer not to do that. So could they just throw it all on Ohtani and just let him hit? I mean, honestly, a lot of these other teams, like the Dodgers, for instance, and that's kind of the team that everyone expects them to go to, perhaps. But the Dodgers need pitching now, which is, we haven't said in a long time, but they need pitching. And so Ohtani is almost maybe more of a luxury for them. Seattle's the one team that can probably wait a year or two to have him pitch again.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, they're flush with pitching. They got great young talent all around, so Seattle seems pretty close. When you go to the other Japanese player, we're talking about Yamamoto, the pitcher coming out. Where do you see him ending up, and is there going to be a big race to get him? Pitching is pitching, right? And with his talent and with his ability, what we've seen out of him and the chatter around him, where does he end up?
So somebody is going to give him a whole lot of money. I think he's going to set a record for free agents coming over from Japan or from Asia. Because if you look at it, I think, the last guy, New York did it with Tanaka, and I think that could be that kind of money or even more for Yamamoto. You're talking about a guy who's 25 years old, who's basically won their Cy Young, if you will, 3 straight times, has 4 to 5 pitches, and is really, can bring it, but also has a split finger that disappears. So I think that he's a guy that is going to be the number 2, commodity here on this. I mean, again, we go back to Bellinger, and he's a guy that obviously a lot of teams could use. There's not a lot of free agent offensive players that could be difference makers, but Yamamoto could be. And I would not be surprised if the Yankees throw a whole lot of money toward him. That makes sense to me because I think they could use that kind of guy, and they could use a splash, and they've done it before to pretty good results. So I'd go Yankees, but again, LA is a team that I would keep my eye on. The Mets obviously have been interested in or have been mentioned with him. So he's going to go to the highest bidder, whoever that might be.
Let's stay with the pitchers just a little bit longer. And as a long-suffering Padres fan, two pitchers are hitting the market that should get high dollar, and that, of course, is Blake Snell on the starting side and Josh Hader, the closer. When you look at two of those pitchers and where they're going to end up, is it the same names, or do you think they could end up in a surprising place?
Well, I think I'm going to break your heart here because I think the very best fit for Blake Snell is the Los Angeles Dodgers. I just do. And I mean, they need to improve their pitching. He knows the NL West. They're very familiar with them. They can hurt a division rival. They need pitching. Like I said, it's something we haven't talked about. But because of the way things have worked out with Kershaw, with the injuries, with Urias' situation, I mean, they need pitching. And Blake Snell, I think, would be a perfect guy there. So I'm sorry about that. Obviously, if it's not there, you're talking about almost any team could use him. Whatever team would put the most money up for him. But and again, it's probably a lot of the same suitors. But I would say the Dodgers. I would pencil that in. As far as Josh Hader is concerned, I'm a Baltimore guy. The Orioles drafted Hader out of a small high school here in Baltimore, and no one really had heard about him. And they traded him. Then he was traded again. And he ended up in Milwaukee and becoming an all-star. And this guy is one of the best closers in the game. And a lot of teams need that, but the Texas Rangers seem like the absolute perfect fit for Josh Hader. If they can move Leclerc to an eighth-inning situation, Spores can pitch like he did in the postseason as a seventh inning, that team is so good overall. And then you add in a Josh Hader, and they spend money. They're not going to be afraid to spend money, and that's the one question that they have. So if I'm them, I was looking at different possibilities and stuff, and it seems like I'm not alone here. Everyone sees Josh Hader as a perfect fit for the Texas Rangers.
Yeah, good call there. And before we move off free agents and talk a little bit about the trade market, you mentioned Cody Bellinger. Cody Bellinger, you talk about a change of scenery doing somebody so well. Former NL MVP goes out to Chicago, has a resurgent there. How much demand is there going to be for Cody Bellinger? Does he stay in Chicago, or is he going to go somewhere else?
I think he probably should stay in Chicago because that seems like a good fit. He obviously rejuvenated his career there. But again, these guys have very few bites at the apple. This is a huge apple for him. And he really is the talent on the free agent market. He is the guy that you can get as far as offensive is concerned. And he plays a premium center field. He can play really kind of wherever you need him to play. But a premium position, a bat like that, a resurgence. He's younger than people realize. He's a former MVP. I think that he is definitely a top bidder kind of guy. And the Cubs have the money to do it. If I'm the Cubs, I bring him back kind of no matter what it takes because I think he is comfortable. He's a guy that needs to feel comfortable. But there are plenty of teams. The Yankees are another team that could use outfield help, that could use some offense. And I know I kind of go back to some of the same old teams, but this is what this market is, Scott, in my opinion anyway, is that it is top-heavy, which means that the top few guys are going to end up going to the big suitors. I mean, unless there is a surprise here, you're going to see New York and L.A. and Chicago and some of those other teams, Boston perhaps, throw some big money at some of these big players. And so that's what it looks like for Bellinger for me. But if I'm the Cubs, I look at his age, I look at what he did, I look at how comfortable he was, and I hold on to him.
Yeah, and Cubby fans love him there, so that would be a good PR move for them as well. But economics of baseball, as you said, those big teams are going to be in the running for those guys. Let's switch to the trade market. You mentioned, and again, I'm sorry for the theme, and it seems so personal to me, which is Juan Soto. How quickly does he get moved? Is it going to happen at the winter meetings? When do you think he gets moved? And is he going to go to one of those big money, big market teams as well?
I would think so because it's going to take a lot to get him off. Even though he is a pending free agent after this year, so it's a situation where the Padres probably shouldn't move him, frankly, because he's a really good player and he's still really young. But the way the Padres are right now, no one really knows exactly what direction they're going. And they obviously could replenish both their system and their current team, and I think that's what they would want. And so he could end up pretty much anywhere. Again, the New York Yankees have a need, and that would probably be the biggest. If I had to pick one thing for the Yankees to do, it would probably be Yamamoto. Secondly, would probably be Soto, just because he's kind of a Stanton 3.0, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he's a younger guy. He's going to demand a large contract. They could get like on a step up, bring him in, and then work all year to try and sign him to a larger deal, which certainly they've been known to do. So I would think, with the injury situation, with the age of the Yankees, I would think that Soto would be a really good fit. Because Stanton, I mean, Brian Cashman came out and said it. How healthy is Stanton going to be, right?
Don't know.
And you have Judge, and he's getting older. Obviously, he's a tremendous talent. Putting a guy that talented but youthful in Soto would be a great fit. And they have the pieces that could do it if they wanted to go that way.
Yeah, no doubt. Continuing with hot stove talk here, when you look at the trade market, give me a couple names you think are going to be moved here either at the winter meetings or shortly thereafter.
One of the most interesting ones to me is Jonathan India, who is a guy. The Cincinnati Reds are just flush with middle infield players. India, if I'm the Reds, I don't trade him. I even talked to him about maybe going to first base. I think he is an igniter. I think he's like a gritty player. He seems to be the kind of guy that teammates rally around. And Votto is not going to be there. So you have a younger team, and I think you have a guy like India who can really lead those young guys and kind of be the next Votto, if you will, with the Reds. However, they're flush in the middle infield, and they could certainly move him for pitching, maybe for some outfield help. I think that he's a guy, he's a former All-Star. He's still super young. And, he was injured some last year, and that's been a thing with him. He's not a particularly big guy, but he can play. And I would take him, and put him, atop of pretty much any lineup in baseball. So he's a guy that I'm keeping my eye on because I do think if the Reds get what they want, he could be moved. Then there's the starting pitching situation. You have several guys out there who could be moved, and you have 29, 30 teams that could use guys. So Dylan Cease is a guy, the Chicago White Sox, if they are going to, really truly rebuild, there's 2 years left on his deal. Obviously the walks are high. Obviously he didn't have a great season this past season, but he is still, with the strikeouts, with swing and miss, he is still a premier pitcher in the American League. I think that he could be moved because a lot of teams would love him, including the team that I cover, the Baltimore Orioles, the team that I'm familiar with. He would be a great fit for them. As far as some other guys, Shane Bieber is a name that's been thrown out there, and he's a guy that I think that people still think can be towards the top of the rotation. It'll be interesting to see if the Seattle Mariners decide to let go one of their young pitching. I wouldn't even call them prospects anymore. They're rotation guys like Logan Gilbert, like George Kirby. They could get a ton for those guys, including some offense and maybe some pitching as well, if they are interested in maybe taking away from that surplus. They already got Castillo top. They have other guys coming. So they could really make a splash, make a huge blockbuster if they were to trade like a Logan Gilbert, who really is their number 3, and he would be number 1 on a lot of teams. So I do think, Scott, that there's going to be a lot of talk and movement as far as some of these pitchers, the top of the rotation type pitchers are concerned, because everybody needs them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, worth their weight in gold. When I was a wee lad and learning about baseball, the first thing my grandfather told me is you can never have too much pitching, and that still holds true in Major League Baseball. Dan the man, I appreciate it. Dan Connolly, our MLB insider here at Sportsnaut. Dan, we'll catch up with you around the winter meetings.
Sounds good. Take care.